When I left John's home, I decided I would go spend time with Sophie. She had a ranch in Fernwood County on Cedar where she raised, trained, and boarded horses. She also had several cows, a henhouse full of chickens, a pond full of ducks, 3 troublemaking goats, 4 hound dogs, and 7 barns full of stray cats, and I am confident I didn't introduce them all. 52 years ago, Sophie left the earth, and the military, to settle on Cedar. Before moving to Cedar, she led a project to rehabilitate a ranching and farming community in eastern Oregon. By the time she concluded the project, she determined she would prefer to live in such a community herself, and would like to raise horses while doing so. So, she moved to Cedar and started the ranch. Now, the ranch keeps her too busy. I am not grumbling, but I hoped I would have seen more of her than I have. She informed me she was my most prolific visitor. "We used to talk almost daily, Dad," she'd say. I guess it was another rendition of me, a much better version before I became the infiltrator. I felt awful because I too was caught up in my new world as I constantly had a lot on my mind and functioned like I was on a mission. Even the days I spent at home suggested they had their purpose. Yet, I missed her. As I flew over Fernwood, I noticed several ranches. Most of the houses were larger than a city block, with many of the barns and outbuildings even bigger. I loved it. Traveling at 300 miles per hour, it seemed like it took up to 10 minutes to pass by one home until the next. Apparently, some ranches lived up to 50 miles apart, which seemed like a great distance, but 50 miles would probably be considered close together on Cedar. Sophie and many of the residents of Fernwood boarded horses. Most of the horses belonged to city dwellers. Sophie boarded at least 200 horses. People throughout Sierra loved to go horseback riding but didn't want to own a ranch or live on one to do so. So, the ranchers boarded their horses for them, and business was booming. Sophie had 10 barns. Each one, with exception of her 2 personal barns, had 50 stalls with tack rooms to accommodate 50 horses and gear. Also, riding arenas were at both ends of each barn. And just inside next to the arenas were large rooms big enough for 50 specials and companions to connect to the hive when they were not busy. 4 barns contained boarders, 2 sat vacant, and 2 others were full of feed and gear. She had 2 smaller barns. One had 8 stalls and a tackle room where she boarded her personal horses. The other had 24 stalls where she boarded horses for the rest of the family. That barn included an area for the rest of her livestock to feed and find refuge, both built close to the house. To help with the work, Sophie had a crew of 6 companions and 75 specials, and just inside each barn, next to the arenas, were large rooms big enough for 50 specials and companions to connect to the hive when they were not busy. Despite all the help Sophie had, most owners preferred to take care of their own animals. So the ranch was generally busy during the day, especially in the morning when most owners came by to care for their animals. Sophie's ranch was 50 square miles, just like all the other ranches in Fernwood. Her ranch butted up against a tract of land which incorporated 480,000 square miles of forests, mountains, prairies, and riding trails, called the Trail. It was 1,200 miles long and 400 miles wide. The trail was set aside for horseback riders so it would provide them a place to ride. Otherwise they would have to negotiate with fences and livestock. It could take up to 3 months to ride from one end of the trail to the other if you hurried. Most riders would only go out for a couple days and occasionally groups would stay out for a week or 2, depending on the sites they wanted to visit. The trail included old towns, cities, and various sites throughout, designed and built by their residents. The sites provided riders with side attractions which added to their experience. Honestly, I would discover I had no clue. I arrived at Sophie's in the late afternoon on Friday. She had just concluded a training session with her 2-year-old quarter horse. As soon as she saw me, she ran up and gave me a big hug. I said, "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Daddy," she answered. "What brings you this way?" I replied, "I came by to spend time with you." "That's wonderful, Dad. I'm thrilled to see you," she responded. We continued to talk as I accompanied her around the pen and into the barn while she turned the youngster back into his stall. We had supper and later sat on the front porch enjoying the conversation and sunset. The next morning was too chilly for me. I hate cold mornings. There was a slight mist coming up from the ground as I peeked out the window. So, I made myself a hot cup of coffee. I took it out to the barn to keep me warm. Sophie was already grooming her third horse, a majestic tall, strong tan buckskin with an almost black mane. She owned 4 horses herself, including the buckskin, the young quarter horse, a golden palomino, and an Appaloosa. I said, "Good morning, hun." "Good morning, Dad," she said as she continued brushing. I asked her, "I thought you only had 4 horses?" She replied, "I do only have 4. Why do you ask?" I asked because there is a 5th in the stall towards the back, I said as I pointed to the stall. I didn't notice it the day before. It was a stately black and white paint which looked similar to the one Dave provided me when I spent time on prairie. No, it wasn't the same horse, but it kept staring at me then reared up whining at me. I looked at Sophie, questioning. She looked at me puzzled. "Dad, you don't even remember your own horse?" Then she said, "He will be upset with you." Once she said that, with a rush, it came back. I have a horse. Why didn't I remember? Without hesitation, I walked back for the reunion. He was a handsome stallion, standing 17 hands with a long full mane. I opened the gate, and he pressed out, almost knocking me over. He put his head on my shoulder as I scratched his neck. I believe he was happy rather than angry. I was just excited to see him. His name was Map. I named him Map because his markings reminded me of one. I whispered to him as to an old friend. Sophie handed me a brush, and I brushed him down. As I did, I observed how Sophie was so gentle as she groomed each one of her animals. I wondered how anyone could live like this from day to day. A redeemed human could live any way they wanted, but many chose common lifestyles such as Sophie and the rest of the residents of Fernwood did. Others too, lived comparable lives to the ones they had, or desired, before the millennium. I guess there are those few who like doing things the old way. I can only imagine. I am sure billions of redeemed humans live fantastic lives beyond even my conception of living, but Sophie and others throughout Sierra prove that is not the case for all immortals. Pete, the milkman, was a fine example. He wasn't a companion, but an immortal who worked as a milkman back in the 1950s on Earth. Now, he has his own dairy farm and markets his own milk products. He has been doing so for over 150 years. Every day, he still loves doing it. I suppose when you love what you do, it does not matter what it is. For some, it takes a while to settle into the lifestyle which makes them happy. It took Pete 40 years to make the move of becoming a milkman again, even though he had considered it often beforehand. Today he has a thriving business on commerce. I recalled how on Earth before the millennium, most people worked jobs they didn't like just so they can pay their bills and buy groceries. Few were fortunate enough to get work they loved. How sad that most people would reject Christ and never find this kind of fulfillment, this kind of happiness. I kept brushing as I watched Sophie's gentle way with the horses. She was happy, and I was happy for her. I was happy for my kids. Now, I was happy for everyone. I guess you would call it joy. Despite the troubling things I carried as a mortal being, and for what lay ahead of me, I had a real joy in my soul. We spent the next day at the ranch celebrating the Sabbath. We reached the rest of the family and they all came over for the day. Early Sunday morning, when I got up, Sophie was already out in the pen brushing the 2-year-old down. I grabbed my coffee and walked out to watch. I said, "He is important to you," then I asked, "Why?" She replied, "He is a racehorse, Dad. He is the progeny of 2 national champions, and I am trying to raise him up to be one too. He still has almost 2 years to go before he will be ready to race." I responded, "He looks like a well-kept horse, hun. What is his name?" She said, "His name is Fleet of Foot. His father is Quicksilver, and his mother's name is Famous Fire." Both are national champions now in retirement. She continued, "Today, I'm going to run him on the track and time him. He loves to run, but gets distracted before he finishes. He is inexperienced, but he will learn. My friend Audra is bringing her 2-year-old over and we will let them run together. Audra's horse does not have that problem. I am hoping it will challenge Fleet and he will run the full distance." Sophie told me about the local horse races, which I did not remember. She told me I had attended many of the events. I did not remember them, even when she explained. Apparently, every fourth Sunday of the month all the owners got together to hold races in Cambridge. Cambridge was a small town built for the races. The races matched different degrees of ability against other horses of like ability. Up to 200 horses from all over Sierra would be engaged in 20 different contests. 1 to 2,000 Sierran citizens attended regularly and always fill the stands and picnic grounds constructed beside the track. There was no gambling. One got a ticket selecting a particular horse to win a race. If your horse won, you received an amount of credits depending on the odds of that horse winning. One could earn credits based on whether a horse won, placed second or third. At the conclusion of the races, the association opened a big barn full of items for the winners to purchase with their credits. Sophie told me one time a person picked up a 1964 restored Corvette. What they needed it for, she had no clue, but the idea was to purchase fun white elephant items. Another person acquired a recliner from the 1950s, crazy stuff. Once Audra arrived, we walked over to Sophie's track. We remained at the gate and let Audra's horse, 7 Things, make a run. What a curious name. Her horse was number 7 in a line of champion stock. We held Fleet back and let him only watch. Audra's horse ran swiftly around the full length of the track. I could tell Fleet wanted to run with him. Sophie wanted to let his adrenaline rise. After the third run by 7, Sophie let Fleet line up next to him. Once they took off, they raced neck and neck the full length of the track, and clearly the training session worked. After 3 runs, Fleet ran by himself. He ran the full track and kept running. Sophie had to get out in front of him to stop him. The plan worked and Sophie felt confident Fleet would continue to run the full distance afterwards. He had mastered the lesson. I spent the next couple of days hanging off a fence watching Sophie train the horses. When I wasn't loitering, or being lazy, I explored all the barns and outbuildings, with the hounds and goats following me everywhere. We discovered a patch of tall grass on the backside of one barn. I spotted movement a ways out in the grass. It turned out to be a pheasant. As I stepped closer, it flew off, and once it did several others followed. I didn't go any further into the tall grass being sure there were several nests in the field, but it didn't stop those dumb goats or the hounds. They ran hurtling through the field like it was nobody's business. Once in the middle, the goats stopped to eat the grass. I escaped as fast as possible. The goats did not follow, but the hounds, encountering nothing of interest in the field, snapped right at my heels. Apparently, as we passed a small irrigation ditch, a small lake, one of several geese made the wrong sound, and the hounds were in full throttle into the water after it. I figured it out. Sophie didn't have geese, and the dogs meant to keep it that way. Off the geese flew. Why is it dogs always wait until they are standing right next to you before they shake? I ran. In the mornings we'd go steal eggs from the chickens, and milk the cows. Nothing like fresh eggs and milk, such is farmer life. When Sophie wasn't occupied on the ranch, we rode. We had thousands of miles of territory in which to ride. One day, we rode into a small town called Clover for lunch. I had missed it on my flyover. It had a feed hardware store, a farm machinery center, and an excellent mom-and-pop restaurant, not much else. I felt like I was moving in. She and I spent the next Sabbath alone at the house. The following Sunday, we traveled to the races. We took a picnic and found a spot next to the track along with hundreds of other people. We sat opposite of the start and finish line that had the stands built right next to it. The stands were full, and the grounds crowded with fans, owners, and horses. A group of kids ran around giving away tickets for the first race, which made it easy as you didn't have to stand in line to get a ticket. The tickets were free, but you could only take one, which included a trifecta. We had fried chicken, fruit, potato salad, and watermelon, which I smeared all over my face. When the race started, everyone ran up to the fence to watch as the racers passed us, everyone yelling the name of their favorite horse and rider. It never fails, something interesting always happens. Well, I wasn't referring to myself standing around with fresh watermelon on my face. Instead, as the horses raced past us in the sixth race, one horse named Johnny Come Lately stopped and walked over to the crowd as they called out his name. In doing so, he caused a great amount of confusion among the other horses, causing them to stop too. A couple even ran the other way. Interestingly, he was the favorite, but he came over and stood at the fence and refused to move no matter how hard the jockey tried to get him going. Just then, a little boy raised with Johnny was calling out his name. Johnny heard the little voice in the loud clamor of the adults standing around him. Johnny stuck his nose up to the fence and these little 5-year-old fingers reached out and scratched his nose. To the loud clapping and the roar of the crowd, Johnny was disqualified. Eventually, the trainer got him off the track. The little boy's mother came and carted him off. I didn't pick one winner. Sophie picked several, but wasn't interested in spending her winnings. She preferred to see the times and how the other horses ran. She gave me her winnings, and I purchased with my credits an early 1800s grandfather clock. The winner's barn was so full of odd items, like a massive garage sale. The next day in the afternoon, I received a call from Jack. "Hi Jack. What's up?" I asked. "Jeff, how would you like to go into New York?" he asked. "I thought I couldn't go to the Earth. Has something changed?" "No, but the itinerary is such that it should have no lasting effects on you or your mission." I said, "Mission, eh?" He replied, "Well, yeah, I guess. I didn't know what else to call it. Do you want to go or not?" "When do we leave?" "I don't know what time it is where you are, but let's say we leave in 4 hours. "1 second," I said as I turned to Sophie and asked her if she had anything planned for the evening. "No, Dad, I had nothing planned." I mentioned to her that Jack had asked me to go to New York and if she wanted to go along. She said she was glad that Jack had asked me, because she wanted to attend a meeting in Clover, and was not planning to go because she thought I would find it boring. She said, "I'll go to the meeting if you are doing something else, Dad." The meeting was about establishing 3 new ranches in the area. The city had to agree on the property location and size of each. It was also a meet and greet of the new ranchers. "Okay, hun, that is excellent timing," I told her. She appeared somewhat relieved. "Are you the Jack?" "Yes, I am. Do you want to go?" he asked again. "I would like to go," I responded. "Okay, see you in 4 hours." Jack showed up at the ranch with an odd-looking transportation vehicle. It looked like a helicopter. I asked him, "What's up with the transport?" "We'll be landing on a helipad in downtown New York. People on Earth would freak out should we land in a normal transportation vehicle. Remember, they're back in the Stone Age compared to Sierra. We don't want to make a spectacle of ourselves nor do we want anyone to alert the newspapers." Once we were off, Jack explained we would arrive in New York at 1:30 in the morning. We would go to McGee's Bakery in Lower Manhattan. I thought, how odd. Then, I asked, "Why are you bringing me all the way to New York to go to a bakery?" "You'll see when we get there. Just go along for once in your life," he said laughing. I replied, "All right, but I hope there is more to this trip than donuts." I can't imagine 2 guys who aggravated each other so much and remained such good friends. Well, I knew he was a good friend, and yet an enigma at the same time. We landed the transport on the edge of Roosevelt Park in a soccer field. Somebody is not going to like that. The weather was cold and dropping half rain, half snow. I guess Jack knew this as he pulled a couple heavy coats and 2 umbrellas from behind the seat. The park itself was lit up and landscaped with wide walking paths surrounded by small trees and large areas of grass. It looked as if it were decorated for the holidays. I turned to Jack. Christmas decorations, already? No, Jeff. It is late fall here in New York, although it is too early for snow. Perhaps it is Hanukkah. I know Hanukkah, Feast of Lights, was always on a different date because of the difference between the old Hebrew calendar and the Gregorian calendar. I know sometime during the early years of the millennium the two calendars were merged. Did that change the date for Christmas? Is it Hanukkah? I asked. Jack answered, "You're reaching for straws, Jeff." When they merged the two, they set the date specifically for the 25th of December. So, Hanukkah and Christmas holiday begins on the 17th of December to allow for the 8 days of Hanukkah, no earlier. Then, I asked, Christmas, what day was Christ actually born? I am sure everyone knows the date now. I, myself, am pretty certain that it was not on December 25th. Well, Christ was born when you wash and hang your jeans out to dry early Saturday morning, but they still celebrate it in December, he replied. What does washing clothes have to do with it? I demanded. Jack replied, What are you talking about, Jeff? Who said anything about clothes? I knew right then he said something I was not supposed to know. At least he kept it brief. He didn't break into a song like Pete. There was a lot of speculation about when Christ was born. Many people thought it was September, others speculated other dates. I didn't understand, because of Jack's response, how that it was a secret. So, I guess, those on Earth still celebrated it on December 25th. Never mind, I said as I put my umbrella up. We walked several blocks as the mix of rain and snow turned to full snow. We came to a corner with a small bakery displaying a big sign that said, McGee's Bakery. The lights were on and I could see a couple people moving around inside. One person stood out. It was a young redhead woman. As we got closer, I realized it was Alex. Is that Alex? I asked. Jack replied, Yeah, this bakery is owned by her relatives. I will let her explain the rest. Once inside, Alex came up and hugged the both of us. I am glad you came, she said as she stood in front of me. Come sit down. We all sat down and Mr. McGee poured each of us a cup of coffee, which warmed me up after our walk over in the cold. Alex explained how McGee's Bakery got started in 1881. When Alex was a young girl before she died of starvation, her father's younger sister had married a man named Clarence McGee. Before the famine got too bad, McGee and his family caught passage to New York, fleeing the famine. Alex's father did not want to leave Ireland, hoping that the famine would not last long. That cost him and his family their lives. In 1847 the young McGee landed in New York with his family, Leanne his wife, Tina his daughter, and Leon his son. Both Tina and Leon were the same age as Alex and Mary, her twin sister. McGee was a baker back in Ireland and took a position as a baker for the previous owner of this bakery. The owner became ill in 1879. Well, he died and his wife did not know how to run a business. She offered the bakery to Clarence on a payment plan. It was tough in the beginning, but Clarence had an idea that made the bakery famous, especially among the large number of Irish immigrants. He changed the name of the bakery to McGee's in 1881. He purchased carts with propane burners designed to heat water and a rack oven to keep other foods warm. It was rough, but he had large pots that fit and held hot coffee. He made racks to put breads, donuts and pastry on and keep them warm. He would go around town selling a cup of coffee and a donut for a nickel. It wasn't long before he had to add more carts and people began showing up at the bakery. He put tables and benches in and has not looked back since. During the tribulation the bakery was left empty as the then owner McGee and his family were Christians and taken in the rapture. It was a big mess by the time the tribulation was over. The relative who owns the bakery now was Aidan McGee. Aidan was the only McGee who was willing to restore the bakery. He did an excellent job, and again the bakery became well known in the neighborhood. Alex told me we always came to the shop early morning because of the fresh donuts, right out of the oven, and Aiden opened the doors just for us. Aiden brought in a platter of fresh donuts and sat them on the table. Now there were 6 of us sitting at the table. On one side was Alex, me and Jack. On the other side sat Tina, Leon, and Aiden. Aiden had brought out 2 of each kind of donuts which had just come out of the oven. He took one of the maple bars, leaving one on the platter. I noticed that Jack was reaching for the second one when I snatched it up. I turned to face Alex and didn't look away. "Is Jack looking at me?" I asked her. "Yes, he is. What did you do?" "Nothing, he is just being creepy," I said as I dunked the maple bar into my coffee. I think I heard a muffled voice behind me. Some people have no manners. I believe Aiden heard him too as he got up and returned with another platter of 6 maple bars. We talked for an hour or two. Alex expressed how it made her happy to see both Tina and Leon. I could tell they were close back in the day. Alex turned and asked, "Do you want to go for a walk?" "Sure, that sounds like fun." Nobody else wanted to go, so we put our coats on and grabbed our umbrellas. The snow was coming down hard, but that didn't deter us. We must have walked for 20 blocks looking at all the department store decorations and the displays in the windows, stopping now and then for closer inspection. I loved that people still drove cars. Even in the middle of the night, New York is still a busy place. Taxis were everywhere, and the occasional sedan would pass by. I realized as we walked around that no matter what condition people lived in, it was the peace, the inner joy people had that made real life. I sensed it in everyone we passed, as we did pass several couples out walking like we were. We greeted one another always with kind compliments. We got back to the bakery and everyone was ready to go. Alex was staying in New York visiting with Tina and Leon. Jack picked out a bag of donuts and 2 loaves of bread to take with him. On the way back, I asked Jack, "Why was this important that you would invite me here and now?" He replied, "Even though no one made a big deal about it, Jeff. You did this every year in the past, generally early morning on Christmas." I thought I usually spent that time with George and Beth, didn't I? I asked. "You and Alex generally disappear sometime after midnight. We know you come here, because you always return with several dozen donuts each Christmas morning. I know you didn't come last year, but the circumstances were somewhat different." "I wish I could remember that," I stated. "I can tell you that I am often surprised at the things you don't know. Then out of the blue, you seem to know everything. It is always a guessing game for me to try and figure it out. I am never quite sure how to say anything or whether I should say anything or not," he responded. "I am sorry, Jack," I answered. "No problem, Jeff. I am happy to be of assistance, more than you know." We came tonight because of Tina and Leon. Alex has not seen them for a while and they asked her if she would like to meet at the bakery. She contacted me and asked if we would like to join her. After much analysis, I could determine that it was safe to do so. So, there was nothing to gain or lose by you coming here, and I thought you would enjoy yourself. Also, it gave you a chance to see a small part of the earth. Everything is the same as it was before the tribulation, absent the acts of sin. Today on earth, each day is the same old routine: get up, go to work, come home, repeat, except it is all under the righteous rule of Christ. The earth is a happy place. Unfortunately, you can't come here whenever you want. Do you understand that? Yes, I do, Jack. Are you going to share those donuts? No. Going to share those donuts? No. Going to share those donuts? No. Going to share those donuts?